Hello and welcome to yet another interesting video, and what we have for you today is a focus chat around the notion of real options. And as usual, I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming to you from the Mozaic Works studios, and with me is once again, after a short break, Adi.
Hello.
Before we go into this topic, how are you doing? What have you been doing in the past few weeks?
Yeah, so keeping myself busy with different things, also some training, some coaching, and doing some of my work, trying to teach or to coach how a team should understand product development and the backlog. This notion popped up about real options. So yeah, quite busy this period. A lot of work also on advanced Scrum Master skills workshop that we have, and which is typically quite well received because we discuss about things somewhere in between the typical Scrum Master role and the rest of the organization, where typically there are the most problems in when using Scrum.
Yeah, and I'm also pumped up after the very successful CPP Europe that we had, the sixth edition of the C++ conference. Really nice. I enjoyed it a lot, and then I also recorded a video, which I'm not sure you've seen actually because you've been busy, but it's about the history of Model View Controller.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool because I've learned from a Quora answer by Alan Kay that the history dates from about 1963.
Yeah, it's a new technology, something that we invented for web.
And not only that, but it was, the first instance, roughly. It wasn't quite MVC, but it came from a guy who invented at the same time clipping windows, the first programming language that was not procedural, graphical user interface. So he was basically drawing with a pencil on a screen in 1963. And he created a lot of technology just for that. And it's just an amazing story. If you are like me, a geek, when it comes to history of software development, that's a very interesting moment. So yeah, anyway, this was very fun. But let's go back to real options. And talking about new things.
Yes.
This is an article written in June 2007 by Chris Metz and Olaf Masson. I know Chris Metz. I've met him. I don't know what he's doing nowadays, but I think still you know more about these people than I do. So can you introduce them a little?
Yes. So I met Chris Metz at the first Agile in Europe conference that was in Germany. And I think that was, I don't remember exactly the year, but maybe 2008, 2010. I don't know exactly. So he was talking about this topic of real options. He was working at that moment. Because he also was one of the people who was part of inventing behavior-driven development. Typically, Dan North says that he's the godfather of BDD. And after that, he started looking into this idea of trying to explain when you need to decide to have to take a decision on a thing that you need to do, and how detrimental it is to take a decision quite when you don't have enough information. So that's why there's the idea that you need to wait until you have enough information. And he was talking about this. So basically, I met Chris with this with this topic at Agile in Europe, in Germany, in Berlin. And anyway, he's a very funny guy. So he was really, and his talks are really funny, and he was really captivating to me. And then I think we continued discussing, and after a few years, we invited him to some ITCAN conference editions, or so all in Bucharest, and we've met in several other conferences and so on. I think he worked at a bank at some moment, something with agility, something I don't remember what, and now he is more consulting for a year or so. But he still remains a person who really came up, and I hope he will came up with more very interesting ideas. As a background, he started off as a business analyst, but even like with PDD or with this and other things that he invented, like feature injection, he has he tries to put agile in a place where collaboration is key and learning is key. So that's what I think. What I know that he says agile is, as a quote from Chris that's very interesting for me. He says, agile is a learning machine. If you don't learn, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So this is what he's all about. Olaf Madsen, I don't know him a lot. I just met him, I think, then at the conference, and I think one more time somewhere at XP Benelux or something. But I just know they were working together, and I don't know.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, they wrote a book about real options, which is actually kind of a comic book.
Yes, exactly. So it's with drawings and everything. It's not your usual IT type of book. It's really, really interesting.
All right. Yeah, and just for if you are interested in how and what a business analyst has to do with behavior-driven development, we also have an interview that Adi did with Liz Keogh about the whole behavior-driven development and the history and so on this very channel, so you can check that out. Yeah. But now let's go back to real options. And first of all, let me just switch to a reader view. First of all, it's important to acknowledge that real options is a term from finance. And I have here a definition from Investopedia, right? Which might sound a bit strange, technical, but a bit technical, but we'll go into more details with the article. So what it says is a real option is an economically valuable right to make or else abandon some choice that it is available to the managers of a company, often concerning business projects or investment opportunities. It is referred to as real because it typically references projects involving a tangible asset instead of a financial instrument. And key takeaways, I'm just going to read this part, not anything else, because they also explain a bit the topic in the article. A real option gives the firm's management the right, but not the obligation to undertake certain business opportunities and investments. And my guess is that, or as far as I understand, real options is the same idea, only applied to features or technical enhancements, or right?
Yeah, even to management. So in the article, we'll see that it's even more than that. But there are also some, let's say, adaptations or limitations where the financial model of real option doesn't really apply to the software world. And that's what Chris and Olaf are explaining in this article.
And one example that I remember from Chris Matt's talks is that he was giving the example, okay, I'm a speaker and I like to go to the big agile conference that takes place in Las Vegas, I think, every year. And so, but he doesn't know whether he will be able to attend or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so what can you do? And what he does is he actually buys the ticket in advance, very, very early, and makes
the plane ticket.
And makes a reservation for the hotel like 1 year before or something like that. Well, but it's he considers that an option because he can cancel the hotel reservation. That's usually easy to do. And even if he doesn't get there and he paid for the plane ticket and he cannot cancel it, typically you cannot get the full amount back. Okay, that's the price of the option, fundamentally.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that because if you buy a lot in advance, the ticket will be cheaper and so on. So it makes sense in terms of optimizing the option. And this is one example that he gives on how real options function, let's say on an individual level and not necessarily technical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you can scroll a bit lower to so what are real options in the article, he says there are three things that are very related to what you just said. A bit lower, those three ideas are the following. Options have value.
Yeah.
This is the first thing. Yeah. Second, options expire. Right. So if you bought a ticket for the conference and it will expire if you don't pop up there, if you don't join the conference. So at one moment the option will expire. And third is never commit early unless you know why. And in my view, and in what I've discussed with Chris, and how I'm seeing the world, is that this is typically the problem, because we come from a very, waterfall approach where we commit early with everything. We have a big backlog, big features. We know what we want to do. We have a project for 5 years. We have everything, the requirements set up, and unless you don't have feedback for those. So that's committing early and you don't know why you're committing to them. And I even remember a story of someone saying that they had such a contract. This person was a contractor for another big company, and someone else, the big company made a contract for a software, and somewhere it was for 5-year projects or something like that. And after 2 years, the big company realized that it's not the product they need. But the contractor worked for 3 years more to work on the code, exactly the things they needed to deliver, knowing that will be never used. Because contractually they needed to deliver that. That's how it was. So that's the opposite of never commit early unless you know why. They did commit early for something that they didn't need. So I think real options, as Chris is explaining, are coming against this situation in this way.
And I think one way I see this is like when you are doing product development, you are basically making a series of bets, right? And you can make one big bet and say, okay, we'll develop all this big thing and it takes 6 months and it costs $500,000 or something like that. And the bet is that at the end we'll be lucky, we'll get users, it will be successful and so on. or somebody will buy us, whatever is your business model.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can make a series of small bets, and each bet is okay. How about we get 100 more users of that type? How about we convert 10% of our free users to paying users? How about we... And you make a number of bets on this thing, and you get to the point where they add up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's been a bit difficult for many people to understand options. So already this model with bets is a bit weird,
Mm-hmm.
I think, for many technical people or even managers working in technical domain, because they see, what I notice is they see the whole. They see like, we need this product, we need this service, we need this whole thing. They don't see it as a series of bets or as one big bet or as a financial kind of thing. What's the relation, do you think, between this model with bets and the model with options?
Well, if you'd talk with someone who's trading, if you'd use term bet, you would probably be very annoyed, because trading is typically where options come from. Trading is based on some knowledge, on some facts, and of course there's a lot of unknown, but still there are some facts that you base your ideas on, maybe statistics and so on. You can make mistakes and analyze them, and take the bad decision. But so that's why I don't see it necessarily as a bet, but more like an informed decision. That's how it should be. It should be an informed decision on deciding what you need to do. And the problem with taking this, as you said, this big bet for 500,000, is that probably you cannot be very well informed if it's that big. So you need to be, if you split it in smaller chunks, it's a better probability that you'll be better informed on buying the option. That's the idea.
Right. So you have more knowledge, and then actually the idea of an option is that you... So how would you do that, let's say, for a product? Okay, you identify options.
Yes.
And
And you should test them.
And
That's
you
the
test
idea.
each of them.
So let me give you two examples. One is very technical from architecture, and the other one is more product owner, product features. One from the architecture, where I remember also Bob Martin wrote about this, but other people wrote about this. The idea that you need a database for a system? So architecturally, you'd say, what do we need to have? It's a new system. What do we need to have? Well, you have the option of making a database from the top, from the beginning. You have the option of not making a database and trying to store everything in memory, and you'll have a clear need that you need to store those into something that's on long-term storage. It's not ephemeral storage like in memory storage. So these are two options, okay? Unless you know that you need a database, it's not just, yeah, of course we need it. Everybody needs a database. Unless you have proof, you have facts, you have a value, a very clear value that you need a database, don't create one yet. But you do have the options. And what's very interesting is that what Chris says, if you take one of the options too early, you kill all the others. Alternating options.
Absolutely, yes.
So the problem is that if you choose something very early, you don't know if one of the other options was more valuable because you haven't tested them. So then what you could do is go in a very simple approach create an experiment with the simplest database and see what happens. See what you need to do to get there. Create an experiment without a database. See where you are, how that will fit your business case. Take feedback. Go to users and or to the business who require this or whoever, and see how it goes. If there's no clear need of a database, don't take that decision yet. So leave that experiment be and continue without it. Because why? It's costly. And if you will take that option, you will kill all the other options, like in memory.
Yeah, so it's basically the it makes a lot of sense, because once you make a decision, we will tend to go on with that decision and not change it. And I think so the first statement, options have value, we can see it in two different ways. It's either that it reduces some cost, right? Because not using a database and using an in-memory database might reduce some cost. There's administration cost, there's all kinds of cost there.
Maintenance,
migrating schemas, and there's a lot of things. Even writing code, right, is a cost.
Operational cost. Yeah.
The code that you have and you need to maintain, it's a cost. But it can also be added value. Things like it might add other users or bring more revenue or something like that, right? That makes sense.
Exactly. So that's why when we say about we can do this in this way, the other way, look at, I don't know, 3 options for something, we need to identify the value and the cost of that option. Yeah. And I think we don't know it typically from the beginning.
This is one thing that I've always missed from his 3 statements. He doesn't say anywhere that options tend to have a cost, right?
Oh, yeah, but he says that.
Yeah, but not in these 3 statements.
Not in these 3 statements, yes.
Yeah.
He says that options have value and options cost. Like your example with the plane ticket, right? The option had the cost of buying it.
Yeah.
And you can choose to take the option or not. So that's a cost. Or here the cost is, with the example of the database, the cost is making the experiment and understanding if it's a good idea or not. It's a cost. Or analyzing the database. What type of database do you need to do? Is it a NoSQL? Is it a SQL? Is it a, I don't know, something else? What do you need to have? You need to analyze, to understand, to take a decision. Maybe you need to make more experiments about it. So this is a cost.
Yeah. And so, okay, so they have value and costs. Options expire, which I think is pretty obvious. I mean, there is a time, taking this example of not using a database for a while, just using in-memory storage. That option expires at some point, because if you want to have users that actually have something stored there and not, that's the point where you absolutely need to add.
Yes.
But then that's the point, actually, right? To commit. So don't commit early. Commit just at the right moment, just when the time comes, just when you have the proof that you need to.
So it's a mix between the experimental method from science. You have make a hypothesis, you make the experiment, and then you by the proof that you have, you decide if your experiment was successful or not. It's a mix of this, and it's a mix of understanding what experiments to do, so that you understand which is the better option for you.
Yeah, and I think it introduces in the well, not so much scientific, more or in the empirical method that we are using.
Yeah.
It introduces the economic aspect, right? Because in science, okay, you have some grants, you have some money, but in reality, it's very hard to estimate how much it will take you to make a discovery, right? It's you are making experiments, discovering something new, then hope to get another grant to make another experiment, and so on. Kind of, that's how it works. But here, in when it comes to software development, to product development, to agile, you tend to have these economic limitations, and right, you need to work within those. And I think indeed that's what makes this model more, well, closer to the real world of product development. And now it's interesting that you have this, that never commit early.
Yeah, so let me come to the second example from the product world, product development world, where you have, let's say that you want to make a product for, I don't know, a generic product, and then you have these options of features. So let's go to be more specific. You want to have something like a social media platform. Okay, it's very trendy now to have a social media platform, and you need to understand what you need to do, what is your public, your what are your users, and then what if you say we need to do this, you come up front, this is what we need to do, we need to have exactly what, I don't know, Facebook or does, and you stay and build it for 2 years, you commit to this, and then of course everyone will say, but this is just a Facebook copy. The other option would be to go and in the market understand what people don't like about Facebook, make experiments about these things, try to be a competitor with it, and try to make things different, with the idea that each experiment might come back with feedback that you don't understand, that brings you more information. So you enhance your options. That's the idea in the first moment. You make product discovery. So you enhance your options, understanding what the audience wants. And then when you say you have enough details, you pick one of the options and you go into a certain direction. Now, there's something very interesting that I don't know if it's in this article or not, that typically Chris and Olaf were saying, is that they talk about the last responsible moment. So about this idea that don't commit unless you know that options expire, that, okay, options do expire, but you have a last responsible moment when you can take the decision. And for some areas, it's quite obvious when the option expires, like with the conference, with the big agile conference, or if you buy a concert ticket. It's obvious when it expires. But in real life, it's not that simple. You don't know when it's too late to decide if you want to be like Facebook or if you want to do something else. It's not very obvious when it's the good moment to decide when you need a database or you don't need a database. And that's where it becomes very tricky. And then to get even more difficult, you have, in fact, you don't know that it's the last responsible moment until that moment has passed. So that becomes even weirder. And then it becomes maybe an array of possible last responsible moments, but you don't know exactly when. So as a product owner or as an architect, as a product manager, you need to have a bit of a feeling when you need to take a decision, when you think you have enough information. But the more you have real proof, the more you will have something that will bring you to a real good decision.
Yeah, and this is one. I guess it's one thing that's interesting about these options is that, as you are saying, you don't know precisely when you've passed the moment, and you still need to make the decision with incomplete information. That's
Yes.
always the case. But I think another part of the art is to keep the options open in a way, and be able to go back if you need to later on. This is one thing that I keep discussing with architects that come to our course. By the way, I'm also teaching right now a course on software architecture principles. I'm just coming after a session with the group, and this was part of the conversation that you, as an architect, you cannot wait to have all the information, because when will you have all the information? Only after everything is implemented, deployed, and in production, and you can measure things. That's when you'll know that things are working. But that's too late. So you need to make the decisions related to architecture earlier. But there is here a bit of, an interesting way to juggle options, which is to keep options open. So to make some decisions, but leave others open for a while longer until you are able to make them. And it's true. I guess it's a kind of intuition, right? There's no way to train for this other than by experience.
I think it has to do also with, what you're saying is having a non-rigid architecture, right?
Yeah.
Keeping it as flexible as possible, as much as possible.
Right. But flexibility also introduces costs. So
of course, because options have cost.
Yeah. So that might be very expensive.
Yeah, we cannot have flexible architecture in all the areas, in all the directions. We cannot have a flexible product in all the directions. You need to take some decisions at one moment, and those will reduce your options. But it's important to understand between the strategic decisions that will maybe make you successful or not, and the other decisions which aren't that important and you can come back to later.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing. I mean, there are a few that you'll need to make early, but then you can keep a lot of those things open. And particularly, I think one of the key things here is to be able to project a bit the future, like a movie, how the product will develop in time or how it might develop in time.
Yes.
And that allows you to keep some of the options open and to know which ones are more likely to pass, right? To happen. In terms of architecture, one example that I keep giving, my guess, my intuition is that there are some patterns in how products evolve. And we've talked about this with other occasions, but one short example is I have this rule, this heuristic that says one will become more. For example, if you have one currency in your application, I can almost bet 90% of the cases somebody will come to you in 1 year, in 2 years, and will say, okay, we need a second currency. Or if you just have one language for your application, at some point somebody will ask for a second language. and so on. So there's all these kinds of things that tend to happen. And if you have these kinds of heuristics, then you can pick the options. They say, okay, so we'll make the application ready to be translated even though we don't have the second language, right? Or we'll store the data type for money with a currency even though we only have one currency right now.
Yeah, keeping your architecture flexible, exactly.
Yeah, and
because
I think
the cost is not big, right? If you do it like that.
So when I think in terms of technical choices, I think it's easy for me. Like if I'm thinking in terms of architecture, I've noticed that he mentions test-driven development. Just quickly, test-driven development is another way of delaying decisions. One exercise you can make is to to take a simple kata and to store everything as a string and delay the representation as a class or object or whatever that is, or data structure, until the last responsible moment. So that's, of course, you don't want to store in the end the strings, but you can delay that. So you can use this as well. But I think where it's more difficult to grasp this is at product level. Because if you think about a product, you have options to develop some features or other features. Is this what you are thinking about when you are using real options for product development?
Yes, so let me give you a very simple thing. Do you want to have an integration with, do you want to have user password to log in? Do you want an integration to log in with Google, log in with Facebook, log in with Twitter, log in with GitHub? These are options.
All of them, of course.
All of them, yeah. So if you take all of them, they have a cost, right?
Yeah.
They have a cost, but do they have benefits? So how do we know? Well, let's start with some user interviews and let's see how much of our users, our audience, will use Facebook or GitHub. If you'd have a very technical audience, you'd guess that probably more people have GitHub than I don't know, Facebook. Maybe, or even they would prefer having a GitHub integration because it's something they use.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
it's an assumption. So that's a hypothesis. I'm starting with this hypothesis that they have more of a GitHub and then GitHub approach. They would prefer this as a login integration. And then you go to your users, start with this question. What would you prefer between these 5 options? And then you'll find out the demographics. You find out everything from your small study. And if it says GitHub, okay, you start with it. And then you'll start receiving feedback. Hey, I don't have GitHub. I'd like to log in with Twitter. Okay. And then you start seeing how much of the rest of the audience would like to go with what? With Twitter, with Facebook, and so on. And then you go on. And
Right.
this way you cover most of the options. And if you only 5% of your audience will want the rest of the 3 options, then you just stop because it's not a good investment anymore.
Right. And I think this relates to the idea that your backlog is actually a set of hypotheses and not a set of requirements.
Exactly. And that's very difficult to grasp, especially for people, let's say, newer to this idea or newer to, or people from big organizations who are used to thinking that they know what they need to have. Because that's typically the idea. Of course, we know what our customers want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this is the biggest problem or the biggest mind barrier where people think from product decision, from top management areas or so on, they think that they know exactly what their customers want, which is from the beginning a mistake.
And I've also seen the other thing that we need to match our competition, right?
Yeah.
And so they start matching features of the competition, but it just makes you a clone of your competition. And okay, it might make sense for some types of products that are very common and will tend to be the same anyway. But what is your differentiator? What would attract users to your product?
Yeah, in some areas, let's take insurance, for example. It's quite difficult because insurance, what's insurance? It's a house insurance. Maybe you have a mortgage insurance. Maybe you have a car insurance and so on. So it's kind of difficult. Like the products are what they are. So of course you can start off with some more ideas, but I think the only thing you can do in this type of more closed markets that are heavy regulated is to just go with the products that they exist. And also probably some of them are related to the government policies. So there are these areas where you don't have a lot of options in terms of what products you sell, but you do have options in terms of how you sell them. And I think that would be the differentiator.
Yeah, I think even with insurance, so you have a differentiator in how easy it is to make an insurance. Do I have to see 10 people, or
so that's what I said. How you sell them, how easy it is to sell them. So that's the idea. Even here you have regulations, right? Because
of course.
Sometimes you are not allowed to sell anything without a signature in some countries.
And this reminds me also of something that I've read. There was an insurance company in US specialized on insuring drunk drivers.
Yeah.
So it was fun, right? Because you have a market that's not covered by other people. And yeah, it has its own challenges, but they actually did something around that.
Of course. But then there's the other type of product where you have too many options, like the web, the I don't know, products, digital products. You can do whatever you want. You have no restrictions. So that's another a different problem. Like with insurances, you're very restricted, and with digital products, you have too many options, and you don't know what to choose. You don't know where to start from.
Okay, I've come to this part of the article, which is quite interesting. I'll just go a little bit through it and then see what we learn. So what he says is the optimal decision process is as follows. For each decision, identify the options available, identify the last point at which a decision can be made. That is the conditions to be met to make a commitment. Until that expiry day, continue to look for new options. I think that's the hardest part. Attempt to push back the decision time. Understand that cost optimization is not the same as revenue optimization or risk reduction.
Yes.
Wait to make decisions and wait until the conditions are correct. When you need to make a commitment and act, do so as quickly as possible. Right. That already sounds very difficult to apply in many organizations. Just pushing back decisions is something.
Yeah, so let's look at how big organizations who, I don't know, started looking at backlogs and agile and digital transformations and so on 10 years ago or 15 years ago. What are they still doing from this point of view of software development? They are still having roadmaps for 1 or 2 years, which are decisions that they take for 1 or 2 years up front, what they need to do. That's why it's really difficult to push the decision, because this is how the organization is used to work. And this means a total different way of working, a great mind shift in what will happen in the future.
And I find those roadmaps hilarious, because usually when you talk to like the planning level, or teams or products, you often have this conflict between, okay, we need to do this absolutely, but we also have these things that are on the roadmap. And it's like those seem like an afterthought most of the time when you look at what's happening, let's say, on the ground, so where people are actually working. But yeah, anyway, this reminds me of impact mapping, because I think with impact map you can document your options, right?
Yes, you document your options by having everyone at the table, which is important because in a complex organization, in a complex system, it's impossible that someone knows everything. So that's basically the idea, having specialists or knowledgeable people at the table and understanding which are your options.
All right. Well, so I think this was quite an interesting conversation, but there's much more we could talk about, right?
Yes. So it's really interesting to read this article from Chris and from Olaf, and there are also some talks that they gave a while back. But I think the difficult part is starting to get your mind around it and try to apply it. That's really difficult, but very, very rewarding.
Yeah, and well, one option for you is to join our impact mapping learning program, because then you will I think it's a very practical way of doing and going in this direction, because when I read this, I have to say it's a bit dry and it's a bit difficult to understand, particularly if you don't know the financial language that well.
Yes.
But it is a very useful technique. I understand its value, definitely. And the mindset change is very difficult. This I can say. Thinking that your backlog is a set of hypotheses instead of a set of requirements. Just take this one thing and try to discuss it in your organization. I think you'll see some blank stares.
Yes.
Or some angry people if you are in the worst case scenario. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'd like to end with a story when I think I came back from this from one of these meetings where I met Chris and one of our colleagues then at Mozaic Works. So I talked about this, and one of our colleagues said that she applied real options at the queue at the supermarket, and it was really weird for the others because what happens is that you have more cashiers open, so she didn't know exactly where to go because she didn't know how far how fast the queue was going. So she decided to stay somewhere in between, and someone asked, where are you staying? She said, I don't know yet, I'm waiting to see. And it was really puzzling. Said, what do you need? I'm keeping my options open, she said. So and yeah, you can have this effect if you start using real options. People will look at you in a weird way.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well, and I think the way I see it, there's the social cost of options, right?
Yes.
All right, so you've heard us talk about real options. There's much more about this topic, right? There's a lot more to discuss, but we'll close it here for now. If you find this interesting, please leave us a comment, ask more questions, suggest other things that we might, chat about related to this. If you need some help with applying these techniques, let us know. As I said, we have this learning program for impact mapping, which will help you identify options and see your product development more your roadmap like a true roadmap and not like a road. And that's very, very powerful when it comes to developing any kind of product. And if you're interested in related topics, we have some interesting videos as well about behavior-driven development, which was, as Adi said, Chris Metz was the grandfather of BDD, and about other very interesting topics. So that's it from now for us. Thank you, Adi.
Thank you as well.
Thank you so much for watching. Leave us a like, share, subscribe, comment, tell other people about this topic. Tell us if you found some blank stares or angry people and you told them about hypotheses and options instead of requirements. And until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.